The Dragon Ball series has had so many games over the years, I don't even know how many there actually are. But the standout games to me will always be the original Budokai trilogy. Those games really set the standard for how good Dragon Ball games could and should be. And still to this day, even after replaying them, they hold up fantastically. This trilogy of games is remembered and cherished for a reason, and each game has standout qualities that the others don't have, making each game a unique experience regardless of story elements being redone. The development team truly put a lot of love into these games, and they are still, to this day, widely regarded as the best Dragon Ball games of all time. So, which is the best one? That's right, the be-all and end-all question. Which out of these three amazing, spectacular, unforgettable games is the absolute best Dragon Ball experience? This isn't an easy question. Like I mentioned, each game has a unique aspect about it that separates it from the other games in the franchise. But we'll use those unique features to figure out the answer to this question. Let's break down the original Budokai trilogy. Now, the best place to begin is with Budokai 1. I think out of all the Budokai entries, this one did its best to try and make you feel like you were playing the anime shot for shot. And what better way to get the player to feel like that than by opening with this? Now, these graphics today are obviously nothing amazing, but for me personally, to this day, they still hold up and are still fun to look at. The vibe from this opening tells you, if you're a Dragon Ball fan, you're in for one fun ride, so buckle up and get ready to play out all your favorite scenes. Also, as a Canadian, I have to say, I wasn't used to Rock the Dragon as my American counterparts were. Over here, we had... There were times Canada would get Rock the Dragon on some episodes, but it was really rare. And there were also times where we would get the American dub switching between the Canadian dub. I remember this happening specifically a lot during the Cell Saga. The Budokai 1 opening is also nice because the later entries for Budokai 2 and 3 wouldn't do in-game graphical openings anymore, so this was and still is a special treat. So just like the intro, the story mode in this game is done with in-game graphics and story sequences that play out just like the anime. I have to give this game credit for that because the later entries wouldn't do this again either, which is a shame because I really enjoyed watching the biggest moments in the anime be recreated in full view cutscenes like this. It just gave the story a more cinematic appeal, and sadly this is the state of most anime games currently, where they just pull stills from the anime and add voiceover now instead of doing this, and I hate it. It really goes to show how much effort was put into these older games that just doesn't happen anymore. So anyway, you watch the cutscenes and in between are your gameplay fights, and that's it. It's simple, but it's effective. For the gameplay, it's pretty straightforward. You had your punch, kick, and key attack buttons. And each character would have special moves that could be executed by pressing the correct input order for said move. In a way, it reminds me of Tekken's attack layout. While the fighting is a classic 2D style, you have a 3D environment where you can sidestep to avoid incoming attacks. I personally love this kind of gameplay since I'm a huge fan of arcade-style fighting games. You could also clash with heavy attacks, and then you would start a high-speed rush fest, and whoever mashed harder would win. If I ever got into one of these now, I just lose because I refuse to destroy my controller. The soundtracks are also amazing for this game and get me pumped as well. Funny story though, a lot of Budokai game soundtracks were actually taken from existing music from popular bands, like Earth, Wind & Fire, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Black Sabbath, just to name a few. So when the games were re-released in the Dragon Ball HD collection for PS3 and Xbox 360, they changed the soundtrack, and honestly I wasn't a huge fan of the newer renditions. My only complaint with this game as a kid was that it stopped after Cell and didn't go up to Buu. And as a kid, we were in the Buu saga when this game came out, so I thought it would cover that. Funny story though, in the multiplayer lobby, I thought this shadow was Majin Buu's, but then it just ended up being Dodoria. But you could still unlock the Great Saiyaman. Regardless of the story not going all the way up to Majin Buu, I thought the pacing was still great. It may have been short and didn't take long to complete, but it was still a fun ride. And after clearing the main story, you could do bonus content with the other characters and play out their mini story sections. Now for the best part, you could also unlock these amazing amazingly creative and fun what-if scenarios. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, heavy kick the subscribe button because I'm also a big fan of what-if scenarios. You get to play stuff out like what if Frieza beat Goku and made his wish for immortality, or Vegeta beating the Z Fighters when he came to Earth, and the absolute best one, hands down no contest, what if Cell absorbed Krillin instead of 18? That poor bastard Yamcha. He still couldn't win the fight. Once you've cleared that hilarious escapade, the other modes include a versus mode where you can play freely against the computer or a friend, the World Tournament mode where you can compete for Zenny, which you could then use to buy capsules, which have different effects and combat abilities to equip onto a character, instead of using the standard loadout. And everyone's favorite mode, the Legend of Hercule. And in this mode, you get to play out the almost kind of certainly sort of mostly based on fictional events headcanon adventure where Hercule defeats all of the Z Fighters and Perfect Cell at the tournament. This obviously is every Dragon Ball fan's dream. I mean, who doesn't want to recreate the best fight in Dragon Ball with Hercule saving the planet single-handedly from Cell? Now, after ending off on the highest of high notes with Hercule, we're moving on to Budokai 2. This, like I mentioned, is when they decided to forego the graphical opening and went with 2D animation. And while I missed it this time around, this opening looks great. The colors, the art, the energy, it was all there for this opening, except for the Japanese lyrics because we only got the instrumental version. Now, this is where the biggest divide for this game comes into play. A lot of people were not expecting this when booting up the game back in the day, and when they did, some people really didn't like it. So when you play the story mode of this game called Dragon World, you play out the game on, well, a game board. And you have characters you can move every turn with goodies scattered across the board that you can collect. And you want to collect those items before the enemy CPUs can. And when you clash with an enemy piece, that's when you duke it out in battle. Each character piece has a health bar, and when it reaches 0, they permanently die. There were also a different set of tasks for each game board. Most of the time it was just destroy the enemy pieces, but you had others like trying to avoid fights so you don't unleash Majin Buu too early. They did get creative when it came to each board's rules. For some though, when you think Dragon Ball Z, you think high-paced, high-action, light-speed, adrenaline-rushed combat, not Dragon Ball Monopoly. Man, Supreme Kai is gonna be pissed that I own the world of the Kais now. Playing this as a kid, I didn't hate it, it's just not what I expected. I actually kind of like some of the aspects of the game board. I think my only real complaint is having to fight the same enemies over and over each turn because they have big health bars. And it gets tedious having to wait every turn to kick their ass. But I do like the rush aspect of trying to get to something on the board before the enemy can. It adds the edge of your seat factor that you want when playing a Dragon Ball game, but it just takes a while watching the pieces carry out their turns on the board. It's not bad, but definitely not for everyone. And just like the other games, there is a tournament mode and dueling mode, so nothing new there. However, the new mode they added is the Bobbity Spaceship mode, where you can do various challenges that will build up keys so you can unlock special capsules you can only get in this mode, as well as unlocking certain characters. I think the best thing about Budokai 2 that wasn't in 1 or 3 is how much fun was put into the fusions and absorptions. Super Buu, for instance, can absorb who he did in the anime with Gotenks and Gohan, but they also gave him absorptions for Frieza, Cell, Vegeta, Tien, and Yamcha. And his reaction to absorbing Tien and Yamcha is priceless. No! I also love when Vegeta gets absorbed, everyone else is like, what the f***? But Vegeta sees he's about to get absorbed and literally gives 0 f***. There's also fusions that weren't carried over into Budokai 3 with Tien and Yamcha and Goku and Hercule, creating the unstoppable Gokule. It's stuff like this that you can tell the dev team really had fun creating, and when playing the game, it was always funny to play matches out with these fusions. I think this is the standout star when talking about Budokai 2 and what it brought to the table for fans to enjoy. Now onto Budokai 3. Just like always, we'll start with the opening. In North America, we only got the instrumental version because I guess they thought kids would think hearing Japanese lyrics would be weird. I have no idea why. Regardless, I dig the animation and energy this opening brings to the table, and it's great watching the little snippet of the Z Fighters duking it out one by one with each villain. And we also finally got the cool and sadly non-canon transformation of Super Saiyan 4. Yeah, this definitely gets you amped to play. So for this game's story mode, they changed it up yet again. This time around, you get to control a character on the overworld map directly and travel to where you want to go on the map. The map has indicators of where you need to go to progress the story, but you don't need to head there right away. You can actually explore areas that are highlighted and get items, moves, characters, and totally different story events if you just roam around and explore. It adds depth. And while basic, some decision making on the player's part if they really want to offset the story and do something else. You will have to play through character story modes multiple times in order to unlock different scenarios for acquiring new characters, but it does give you a reason for repeat playthroughs. For instance, one that still sends a shiver down my spine to this day is when you're in the Buu arc and you can stumble upon Kibito Kai in the desert, and he tells you that he's sensing a presence even more sinister than Buu's on Earth. So when the time comes further down the Buu arc, Vegeta and Goku feel it as well, and when you go to check it out, you run into Broly. Or even during the Frieza arc, after spirit bombing Frieza, instead of fighting Frieza again, you can run into Cooler, who you now need to fight instead. I think the only thing I miss from the older Budokai games that this game doesn't have for story mode are the 3D models of the characters. One had fully rendered in-game cutscenes, and two didn't go as far but kept the 3D models of characters talking to each other. But for Budokai 3, it's just character cutouts with voiceover, and not even all of those scenes are even voiced. The other aspect this game added to the story mode were now your characters could level up after gaining enough experience points. You could then put those points into different stats, which would then up the corresponding stat line. So basically, if you played a lot, your character would become... This time around for other modes, you do have your dueling mode and tournament mode again as per usual, but they also added Dragon Arena. This is a mode where you'll take a character and fight CPUs with levels, and the higher the level, the tougher they are. Personally, I never cared for this mode, and after unlocking who I needed to by playing it, I never touched it again. Budokai 3's best factor is how many characters you get to play as. It being the third installment in the series though, this obviously would have happened. Sadly, some of the fusions and absorptions from Budokai 2 didn't return, and I never understood why. But hey, we got Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta to make up for it. This game had a ton of characters, as well as giving us our first GT character, Omega Shenron. Side note, another thing I never got either is Pan is found in the load your file screen but isn't a playable character. I don't know who okayed that, but I always thought it was weird. The amount of characters and attack moves, fusions, and transformations were amazing for this game. I spent so many hours playing the versus mode for this game, and the updated combat mechanics just made the gameplay that much more exciting and competitive to play. They also finally added beam struggles, where in the last two Budokai games they would just clash. They also added the Dragon Rush. The Dragon Rush was something every character could execute. What would happen is when activated, it was basically a rock, paper, scissors match with your 4 buttons, and if the defending player guessed the same button input as the player who activated the Dragon Rush, it would end. And if you guessed correctly on the first try, you could punish the opposing player for even attempting it, and make them feel even worse than Vegeta does when he thinks about this. However, if the defending player guessed wrong every time, by the end you could hit them for massive amounts of damage. They also added in the struggle feature again from Budokai 2 for super attacks, but now instead of destroying your control stick, aggressively rotating them, you had a bar instead where you needed to time your input, and when it was nearly full, you would press the input, and whoever did this better would win the struggle. It saved so many controllers from death, kind of. Not really, because beam struggles you still had to rotate it like a bitch. Now after going over these 3 amazing games, which is the best? Drum roll. I'm going to have to say Budokai 3. I mean, just in terms of the vast amount of characters and moves and just overall content, it has to be Budokai 3. I do think on a personal note though, the original Budokai shouldn't be overlooked. I personally believe that from a purely single player perspective, it has the better story mode. And it shouldn't be overlooked how much time the dev team took to make those story cutscenes play out the way they did, especially because that's just a lost art form nowadays. But if we're talking about pure gameplay and raw story remaster, Budokai 3 just has so many more features than the other two, and it really took the best gameplay aspects of the other two games and found a good balance by the third installment. Sadly, even though I still enjoy Budokai 2, it doesn't do what either Budokai 1 or 3 can do, and really does feel like the overlooked middle child. Even when they did the Budokai HD collection for PS3 and 360, they completely left out Budokai 2. I guess Budokai 2 and Yamcha both know how it feels to be left out now. So there you have it. Budokai 3 comes out on top, followed closely by the original, then Budokai 2. Each of these games is a must-play if you're a Dragon Ball Z fan though. None of them are bad games, and all of them, regardless of their differences, do truly feel like amazing Dragon Ball experiences. So if you haven't played any of these games yet, give them a try. And if you haven't played them in years, maybe it's time to give them a quick revisit. Each of these games brings a distinct and unique style, whether it be in gameplay or story, and I think this trilogy of games deserves the love and respect it gets from longtime fans. But tell me, which of these games is your favorite and why? I'll be sure to read what you guys say in the comments. There's one thing I can say without a doubt though, and that's the fact that for the foreseeable future, we will always have fun Dragon Ball games to play. So what are you waiting for? The fun and excitement is waiting for you. Nath out. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. The original Budokai games are near and dear to me, so I'm glad I could finally make a video about them. Budokai 1 was also my first Dragon Ball game, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and be sure to check out some of my other videos on screen now you might also enjoy. And I'll see you soon.